Session 10 of the Law of One. In this session, they speak about Maldek as well as Atlantis and Lemuria. It was a little bit of a tricky one for me to record, and with all of the others, generally I would just pick up my phone and start recording, and that was that. If something needed to be edited out, which wasn't that much, I would edit it out at the end and post. But this one I've really struggled with because it's a little bit of a sensitive topic right at the beginning. And it's one that, I keep debating. Do I give my little take on this, and do I open that can, or do I, it's one of those kind of rabbit holes that are not the good feeling kind of rabbit holes. The one of, do you bury your head in the sand, or do you continue to engage and observe and learn? It's one of those. So I'm going to give it another shot now and see if we can get past this beginning point and finally to the end of this session. So bear with me and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. So the questioner asks Ra to go back to Maldek just before the transfer of the souls from there to Earth. How did the Law of One operate, and what happened to Maldek or to the people, and how long ago did this happen? So Ra says that Maldek's civilization was similar to Atlantis in that they'd gained technological information and used it without care for the preservation of their planet. Ra does speak more about this in later on in this session, as well as in later sessions. So we'll just let them come to that information organically. And then he says that the majority of its entities were of a negative polarity or of a path to serve self, but they believed that they were on a positive path in service of others. This is where it gets sensitive right at the beginning. And the reason is because we see this so much in our own civilization, in our own experience of reality. Is so many believe that they hold the right way, they hold the truth, and so much harm and destruction and suffering has been caused because of that strong belief that one group is right and another is wrong. I think a good example of this is Hitler. My brother and I also had a conversation around this on numerous occasions, where he believes that the government withholding information from the masses is for the good of the masses, because they are not able to handle the truth. And this comes from an experience where he had experienced life as the Matrix. He had been shown through an expanded consciousness or an altered state experience that we're basically in the Matrix and we're all feeding our lives to this cause. And the realization and the experience of that was it was too much for his human ego to manage. And he said to me that after that experience, he'd so desired that, he never wanted to know that. He never wanted to experience that. It's too much. He said he could understand why the guy in the Matrix ended up taking the other pill and going back into the Matrix and, forgetting the truth. And I've had moments of this as well, where I've had realizations, especially in my first awakening, where it was like, this is too much for a little tiny human. And I had the desire as well to go back to sleep. I was like, I don't know if I can be awake in a sleeping world. It's far too much, especially because I didn't have community around me at the time. So it felt extremely lonely, and like you had to kind of carry this weight of truth where everywhere you went, nobody else knew. It really is a very real discomfort that comes along after awakening. But coming back to the government experience, or the government, or the thoughts of the government and the people, You know, Ra also speaks about how the Orion group is here to enslave certain groups and to empower others. And this is another rabbit hole that you can really die in. I sound so dramatic as I say that, but I know people, there are people in my life that spend all of their waking hours diving into this rabbit hole. And I promise you, it is so easy to get stuck in it, which is something that I'd also mentioned in a previous session, that I spend a little bit of time diving into the darkness just so that I'm not burying my head in the sand. And when I feel like it's time to learn a little bit more about what's going on and what's really going on in the world on a 3D level, and when it starts to feel heavy and I can feel my consciousness being contracted and my energy, just getting denser, then I exit. I make my exit and I don't go back until I feel I have the capacity again. But what I was going to say about the government is that there is so much that is being withheld from us intentionally, and that the place that we're currently in is not of our own doing entirely, right? And that should be considered. We cannot look up to these authorities and trust that they have our best interests at heart. Where that may not be the case, and we are essentially continuing to give our power away. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. That was easier than the previous couple of attempts. Moving on, he says that their biosphere was destroyed and disintegrated because of war, and that this happened about 705,000 years ago. That the people of Maldek were so traumatized that they were in a social complex knot of fear, his words, and that no one could be reached for some time. So they were all just basically stuck in this limbo. Then Ra says about 600,000 years ago, the Confederation were able to deploy a social memory complex and untie the knot of fear. And after that point, the entities were then able to remember that they were conscious, and that this awareness brought them to the lower astral planes where they could be nurtured and healed. This reminds me of a book which was made into a movie called Astral City, that is supposedly about a man who passed away and then channeled this book to someone who was still incarnate, or this information, and that person then turned it into a book about dying and ending up in purgatory, where he was accused of committing suicide. And he said there's no chance that he'd committed suicide. This was a natural death. And they eventually explained to him that this, the reason that he's been considered as committing suicide is because he didn't take care of his physical vessel, that he did so much to cause harm to it and not to take care of it. And so essentially he had killed himself through his eating habits, through not exercising. I don't know if he smoked, but through all of these harmful behaviors. And one of the things that came up in that movie was that once he was removed from purgatory and taken to a place where he could be healed, which was in the astral city, he had spent some time in this kind of healing center. And that also made me think about suicide. How when people feel like they cannot bear the pain of this human existence, they decide to make an exit. But really that the pain is not left behind with the physical vessel. It goes with you, and you still have to heal from that pain and then try again, supposedly. So, yeah, continuing on, this made it possible for each of them to examine the previous life's distortions. So basically going through their healing process in the lower astral planes. After their experience, they decided to alleviate their karma by being born on Earth in forms that were not fully human. So they were living these lives until their tendencies toward destruction and their tendencies toward destruction are transformed into a desire to serve others more purely. So because they believed that they were serving others, where they were actually serving the self, they decided to incarnate in a way that would help them to learn that lesson, that you are not actually doing this for others. You think you are doing this for others, but really you are doing it for yourself. And the what came of that was the destruction of your planet and your entire race. I mean, this is such an extreme example, but if you just take a moment to reflect on yourself, and this is a really confronting thought right now. Where are you fooling yourself into thinking that your actions are to serve others, but they are really to serve yourself? It stings a little bit, right? To contemplate that. Maybe make a note of that and really sit in meditation or in contemplation with that if you are interested in understanding yourself a little more. This is something I'm constantly questioning, is what are my intentions behind this action? When I share certain things with my coaching groups, when I decide to coach, in these group settings, when I decide to serve others, what is my true reason for doing so? Is it because my soul is calling me and I must do this? It feels like I like it's a part of me, I have to. Or is there some gap within my psychology that is needing to be filled through service to others? Masked, really, or to service to self, but masked as service to others. Okay, so moving on. Because this was a conscious decision for most of the Maldek people, the transition to this planet started approximately 500,000 years ago, and the type of body that was used was what was available at the time. So the questioner asks if that was the body of an ape. Ra says correct. And then the questioner asks, have the Maldek entities transformed now, or are they second density, or are they forming some third density planet now? And when he asks about a third density planet, I'm not sure if there's something I don't understand or something he doesn't understand about this whole process of being harvested and moving on or up in density. I'm going to leave that there. I'm not going to go any more into it, but I'm not sure if he meant, third density planet. But that was the question. Then Ra says that their consciousness has always been third density. It's just that they incarnated into second density vehicles. And that to alleviate their karma, the consciousness was placed in second density bodies that are less capable of complex actions and manipulations, which is suited for their third density mental distortions. And basically, so they can't engage in behaviors that would further their mental distortions. I'm not sure if you need a breakdown of that, but just a little side note. Because they're in the vehicle of a second density body, they can't create the kinds of technologies that a third density body could. And so they couldn't dig themselves into a deeper hole karmically while they are trying to alleviate their karma from the previous situation. And then the questioner says, so basically the ape body was sort of a protection mechanism while they released their karma. And then the questioner asks, have any of them graduated into third density bodies yet? Ra says many remove the accumulated karma, thus being able to accept a third density cycle in a third density body. And most have incarnated elsewhere, but as this planet reached third density, some were able to join here on Earth in third density form. So I guess it just depended on the timing, whether a cycle was completing when they were ready to kind of graduate. And maybe if they had graduated personally but the cycle was not yet done, then maybe they moved on to other planets that would allow them to move into a third density vehicle. If that's how it works. That's my understanding at this moment. And then he says a few still remain in second density form on Earth as they haven't yet alleviated their karma. Guys, this is 705,000 years ago. And they haven't yet alleviated their karma. I don't know about you, but with linear time and this limited mind that I am looking at this whole thing through, I can't imagine being stuck in the same repeating lesson, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime for 705,000 years. At this point in time, we have access to so much information that gives us the opportunity to speed up this process. And I think they speak about it as well, either in this session or in a past session. And I guess that's the whole being on the ascension journey consciously part, is you don't need to take 705,000 years to learn the lesson. You have access to information, the consciousness, and the ability to be able to intentionally and consciously practice releasing yourself from these ties, these holds. And I don't believe a soul is being punished when it's placed in these cycles. I believe that it is just, firstly, it's decision to want to learn and to want to evolve and grow and to test itself and to explore. And also, if you remember from an earlier session, Ra talked about like a line of light, and that as the soul moves along this line of light, when the light becomes too bright, that is where it stops. That's where it will continue to do its learning. That is how much light it can be exposed to without feeling overwhelmed or overcome. And so that's how you know. But basically, being in this little lifetime where we're able to speed up this whole process, you're able to move further along the line much more quickly. Now, I'm not saying that this is the case for every soul that has incarnated, because I also believe that there are souls from a higher density that have come to serve, that maybe have the capacity to be exposed to more light than maybe a soul that has been stuck in the cycle for 705,000 years, for example. Anyway, let me continue. So the questioner asks, are these the Bigfoot? And Ra says, these are one type of Bigfoot. Questioner asks, then our present race consists of some from Maldek and some from Mars. Are there other entities from other places? Ra says yes, many, many places. When there is a cycle change, some must repeat, and so they will find an appropriate planet. Here answers the question of my previous thought. And that it's uncommon for a planet to have beings from so many different places, but this explains a lot about your current situation. You are experiencing third density with many beings who need to repeat the cycle, making it difficult to create unity, even with the help and effort of many teachers. So basically, other entities who were ready to move on to third density from second density, or whose planet was moving into fourth density, but they were not ready to graduate, came here. And now we have races from all over the galaxy or all over the universe that are all learning together at different stages. So the questioner, when Maldek was destroyed, were some advanced enough to transfer to other planets? And Ra says none of them escaped. All of them were caught in that knot. That's a little bit, of an unsettling thought, thinking about how things are on Earth and the potential for absolute destruction because of the weapons that we have, and how even higher consciousness beings that are here to help might get caught in that knot, if I understand this correctly. It seems so. None escaped. Then the questioner says, or asks, is there any danger of this happening on Earth? Ra says, we believe it might not be completely harmless to predict your future. So he doesn't want to give information about the future because it might impact our free will, maybe. And then he says the current mindset does exist for developing and using certain technologies. Remember, this was in the 80s. We've expanded and evolved a lot more technologically since then. We think it's more important to guide and orient your people's minds and spirits rather than dismantling the technologies themselves. For are not all things that exist part of the Creator? Therefore, freely to choose is your honor and duty. So basically, blow yourselves up or don't blow yourselves up. Either way, the universe continues on. Not a very comforting thought, but I guess that's why there are all these light workers and star seeds and wanderers and different waves of higher density beings and dimensional beings that are here to help raise the consciousness of this planet and help her shift into the next dimension, and also help to bring us further down the line away from the possibility or the potential of this kind of thing happening here. I've heard somewhere or read somewhere, I can't remember, that the reason that it might even come up in this book, we'll see, that the reason that these waves of volunteers even started coming onto Earth was because of what happened in Japan and how that bombing in Hiroshima radiated out into the rest of the universe and impacted so many, and that light workers and others decided to incarnate to keep this from happening again, what happened in Maldek. And so that's always made me feel really hopeful that I everywhere I look, I see people awakening. I don't know what you're seeing, depending on where your awareness is placed. But I see people awakening. I see things changing. I see systems collapsing. I see people questioning. I see things changing, most importantly. And so I feel hopeful about this future, and the potential of not blowing ourselves up. Just a warning, it is another long session. So here we go, continuing on. The questioner asks, how does an entity move from one planet to another after graduation? Like the physical, the astral, etc., all of that I am questioning. Ra says, first your mind-body-spirit complex goes through a healing process. And now when he says mind, body, spirit, my question is by the body. Okay, are we leaving the physical carbon body behind? And are we talking about an astral body? Are we talking about these other layers of bodies, the emotional, mental? Are we talking about those bodies? Whatever it is, I'm going to leave that as a question mark. So that goes through a healing process, which makes me again think of Astral City that I spoke about earlier. The healing process of love and light. This process can take varying amounts of time, and once you're aligned, your experiences are reviewed and purified, keeping only the essential lessons. Then the being, you, evaluates the density needs and chooses an appropriate environment for repetition of the cycle or moving forward to the next cycle. So it sounds very much like you have a choice. I've never believed, again, in karma being some kind of punishment. Well, I can't say never believed, because before I started studying any of this metaphysical stuff, that's exactly what I thought karma was. A punishment. You do a bad thing happens to you. My views have shifted very much so on this topic, which I will not get into here. Moving on. And then the process of harvesting is guarded and watched over by many. And then the questioner asks, when he is moved from one planet to the next, is he moved in thought or in a vehicle? Ra says the mind, body, spirit is one with the Creator, and so there is no time-space distortion. Therefore, it's just a matter of thinking the proper location. Brings my awareness again to distance healing. How is it possible to heal somebody on the other side of the planet? Because time and space are illusions of this experience, this reality. And when you do any kind of distance healing, you're moving beyond time and space. Moving on, the questioner, when an entity is incarnate in the third density, he may learn unconsciously without knowing he is learning, or he may learn consciously in the ways of the law of one. Can he accelerate his growth if he learns consciously? Here it is. It is in this one. I haven't looked at these notes since I wrote them out a couple days ago. So I'm looking at them for the first time now as I record this, since I made them. And so I've forgotten a lot of what's in here. Ra says correct. In other words, guys, you don't need 705,000 years to learn the lesson. And then the questioner, then although many entities aren't aware of this, what they really desire is to accelerate their growth. And it is their job to discover this while incarnate, ? Is it correct that they can accelerate their growth much more in the third density incarnate than between lives? Ra says we will try to explain. The law of one has a primal distortion called free will. So each entity is free to accept, reject, or ignore other humans and ignore creation itself. There are many people in your social memory complex distortion at present who engage daily in the law of one primal distortion, the ways of love. However, and these are his exact words, if this same entity being biased from the depths of its mind-body-spirit complex towards love and light were then to accept responsibility for each moment of the time-space accumulation, basically the past. So if this individual were able to accept responsibility, from the place of love light for the past, such an entity can empower its progress in much the same way as we describe the empowering of the call of your social complex distortion to the Confederation. Now, I have a question here. Do they mean it is squared and amplified beyond just affecting themselves as an individual, the way that they explained before, that when one person calls, it's not just one? When two calls, it's not, when 10 calls, it's 1,000 and something. Does this mean that if one person makes this shift in consciousness, that it affects the others to this kind of squaring method that they use? I'll continue on. The questioner says, please state, empower this call, inverted commas, in a different way. Ra, in exactly his words, says, we understand you to speak now of our previous information. The call begins with one. It equals infinity and is not counted. So I ask why, but I think he answers that by saying that it's the foundation, the cornerstone. The second call is added. The third doubles the second. And each additional caller, my writing is poor, doubling or empowering the preceding call. Thus, the call of many of your peoples is many, many, powered and overwhelmingly heard to the infinite reaches of the one Creator. And then I just have a little note. But this is with the collective. Is the same power granted individually that impacts the collective? Same question from above. I'm not sure. I remember seeing, I think it's David Hawkins, his work on consciousness, his consciousness chart, or the map of consciousness it was called, where I remember Aaron Abke doing a video on this, and when I went back to look for the video, it was removed. But it was explaining basically how one person that has achieved enlightenment, so at the top of that chart, or even higher up on the chart, unconditional love, peace, etc., enlightenment, because of that numbering system, and I can't tell you exactly what the number means, the bottom of the chart being grief and fear and anger and all of that, the bottom being 20, the top being 1000 plus for enlightenment, that each person that accomplishes that higher consciousness, that higher energy, kind of doesn't eliminate, but balances out that many of the lower consciousness to the same amount as where they are. I don't know what these amounts are measured as. There is no word that I can use for it. But if you imagine somebody at 1,000 and how many people at 20 can kind of be balanced out by that 1,000. Do the math. I'm not going to attempt to do that right now, but you get my point. So basically, you don't need every person on the planet to become awakened or enlightened or in a state or into a state of unconditional love in order for humanity's consciousness to raise as a collective. You just need more than da 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 da, whatever the math is. If we've got a little math genius listening to this, you're welcome to pop something down in the comments. The questioner then goes on to ask, could you state some practices or exercises to accelerate growth toward the law of one? And then Ra gives 4. So the first one, the moment contains love. So that is the lesson or the goal of this illusion or density. And, I remember this insight when I was in meditation one day, and I had started to come into a state of fear again, and I had this kind of rejection of this fear and this, I really didn't want it, And as I sat in this meditation, resisting this fear that was coming up in me again, I realized that actually love was present even in the fear. That was a massive realization for me because I'd always seen them as, kind of polarized. But so moving on, the exercise is to consciously seek that love with awareness and understanding. So the first attempt is the cornerstone, right? Nice and easy. And it's crucial. It's the foundation. This choice is the foundation for the rest of your life experiences. And then the second one begins the addition, and the same thing happens again with that squaring situation. The third, the fourth, and the fifth double or empower the previous. And there could be the same loss of effectiveness some loss of effectiveness due to insincerity. But the act of consciously deciding to seek love is so important that the loss of power from insincerity is minor. So just think for a moment of all the ways that we seek to protect ourselves and our beliefs rather than to love or to find love in or see love in all experiences, in all things. I think it really goes against our natural instinct to preserve ourselves. Looking for love in the pain, looking for love in the anger, look for love in the seeming rejection, look for love in the XYZ. The second one is the universe is one being. When you look at another mind, body, spirit complex, see the creator. This became easy for me after I'd gone through my awakening, when I had seen God in myself, when I had really experienced that this one consciousness is in this vessel, and it is in that vessel, and in that vessel, and in the walls, and in the curtains, and in the lamp. It became really easy, but experientially. But I remember hearing Deepak Chopra say that he makes a practice out of it, that when he's walking in the street, he tells himself to, he reminds himself to see God in this person, see God in that thing, see God, see God, see God. The third is to gaze in the mirror and see the Creator. This one. Look in the mirror and see the Creator. Look at your hands and see God. Look at your hair and the pimples on your face and see God. Look at your stretch marks and your dimples. I'm getting all sentimental here, but it's a really big deal. This, I would, say, continues on the healing process from a few sessions ago, how to become a healer. Now we take it a step deeper and we go even further into that journey, is not just acceptance anymore. Now we're seeing God, in all these parts of the self. And then the fourth is gaze the creation around the mind, body, spirit complex of each entity and see the creator. So what every person has created, see the creator in their creation. See the creator in the trees, see the creator in the life that they have created for themselves, outside of the judgment of good and bad and right and wrong and what should be and what shouldn't be. And can we expand our consciousness to this point? The foundation or prerequisites of these exercises is meditation, prayer, or contemplation. And with this attitude, these exercises can be processed, but without it, the information will not sink down to the roots of the tree of mind. I think this is important. Even when you're walking around and you see the creator in these things, can you deeply acknowledge this is the creator? Even if you are driving to work and you are contemplating the creator in your steering wheel, it sounds odd, in the person driving in front of you, in the road that you drive on, taking every opportunity to see God, and then allowing that to kind of really settle into your subconscious mind and not just leaving it at the surface as a surface kind of practice. I'm doing this as homework kind of thing, Anyway, the questioner goes on to say, can you tell me about Atlantis and Lemuria? How did these civilizations occur and where did they come from? Ra says this is the last question. It was a pretty long one. And then he starts with Lemuria. He says the Mu entities, is what they're called, were primitive in nature, but with very advanced spiritual distortions. He says it was part of this cycle, our current cycle, approximately 53,000 years ago. And it was a healthful and harmless place that was washed away by, I imagine, earthquakes through no fault of their own. He mentioned something about the fault lines moving or something along those lines. So I interpreted it as meaning earthquakes came and washed them away. Some survived and reached Russia, North and South America. The American Indians were descendants of the Mu, basically, the Mu. They also came from elsewhere because of the age of their sun, that it couldn't support the density life anymore. And their planet was a second density planet from the galaxy of Deneb. And so that's why they came here, to continue their evolutionary process. And then Atlantis. He says that the Atlantean race was a mixed social complex which began approximately 31,000 years ago, so it's a bit younger than the Mu. And it was slow growing and rural until about 15,000 years ago. And then it quickly reached a high-tech understanding, which caused it to use intelligent infinity in a less informative way. I've, listened to a few things on Atlantis, and there seems to be a common theme around they were technologically advanced, they abused that power, and then they basically caused hell on Earth and their own destruction as well. So they used intelligent energy to manipulate the indigo or pineal ray and created life forms. I'm not sure how true this is, and I can't remember if it's discussed in the Law of One, but I remember listening to some documentary on this about the Atlantean people mixing or creating hybrid humans with animal species. And that's where some of these myths come from, from the Greek mythology, and centaurs and that kind of thing, that this was the kind of creation that they were messing around with. Again, I cannot remember where I watched that and if it's a reputable source, but I'll just drop that in there. If you want to dig a little more into it, then enjoy. And then instead of healing and perfecting their own bodies, they did that, which put them on the path to serve self, or on the negative path. And then about 11,000 years ago, the first wars began on their planet, which killed about 40% of their population. And then the second devastating conflict occurred about 10,821 years ago. This was at the time of the book that was channeled. And it created an earth-changing configuration, I imagine earthquake. And the largest part of the land was basically, he says, inundated, but he doesn't say by what, so I imagine by water. And many left for Tibet, Peru, and Turkey. And then there's a note at the bottom of this session that says that the dates that were given in this session conflict with those in session 21, question 5. So you can keep that in mind, that there might be some errors. Also, the books that I used for this are the old books, not the new ones. There is a new set that they say they have transcribed again, like especially the parts that they couldn't hear very well. And so they try to be more accurate in that process. But I'm using the old books and not the new ones. So yeah, I hope you found this session interesting. I definitely am feeling more drawn to the history than to our rowdy Orion group. But that's my bias. I hope you guys have a really cool day, and I'll see you guys on session 11.